And Mr. Chair, I don't have any of the documents for opening the meeting or anything like that, but
I got it all. Don't
I
even worry
figured you
about it.
did.
All right. All right. Let's call to order this special finance committee meeting for the 17th of May. It's 5:45 p.m. I will begin by reading the accessibility statement and Title VI non-discrimination statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Microphones or telephones will be used by all speakers. Large print materials are available upon advance request. If you would like either of these accommodations, please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833, extension 202. The notice of non-discrimination rights and protections to beneficiaries with regard to the Title VI non-discrimination protections and the state non-discrimination protections is posted in this meeting room and is also available on the Old Colony Planning Council website. Please contact Mary Waldron at 508-583-1833, extension 202 for more information. Thank you. All right.
I'll just head into the roll call, Mr. Chair, just for purposes. Chairman Silvestri.
Present.
President Christine Joy.
Present.
Becky Coletta.
Present.
Stephen Santusonio.
Present.
President-elect Val Massard.
Present.
And for staff, Charlie Kilmer, Brenda Robinson, and Mary Waldron.
Present.
Thank you. And I think, Mr. Chair, to head right into the document, and I can pull it up and share my screen.
Yep.
In just a minute, let me just get this. Too many openings here. Here we go. Sorry about that. Oh, did I just close my window?
You did so.
Here we
There you
go.
go.
Hey,
Sorry
you're
about
back.
that. Okay, so in the email that I sent, I also provided this document, but I also sent along the questions. I want to say special thanks to Sean Noel, who listened to the tape and grabbed all those questions. It took some time, but if we could either go through the questions or we can just go through the document. I don't know, Matthew, if I cannot share the questions and the document at the same time. That's my only challenge. So I guess this is the first one here. What does OCPC? I did send the handbook. I sent both the OCPC bylaws and I also sent the OCPC employee handbook.
Yeah, so we can, I can just fill in the blanks on that. That won't be an issue.
Right. So then it was just an insert. You deleted the then OCPC Chief Executive Officer.
So this was I know this came up in the last conversation we had, the last meeting we had. We kind of batted it around. And I guess when you look at the statute, it's not what we would usually consider a CEO in the ordinary course of things, but it would appear that it's the governing board, commission, or committee in this particular governmental unit that is the CEO. So it's the council in this particular matter. So I made the amendments as needed on those three of the positions.
Right.
And actually, Mary, you could just talk 1 second. There was a looking at the draft that's before the committee right now is a result of the 12 questions or 12 comments that were made, as well as the notes that I had from on my own document on the last meeting. And so one thing that I think is relevant to this particular section, there was in I think note number 3, it says that Becky Coletta asked if an elected employee can serve some of the roles defined by the statute. A person with investment experience. Matt replied that OCPC controls the definition, so we felt the answer was yes. I think things might have been a little confusing. I just want to clarify that I don't think you can have 2 roles I think you can be an elected employee, but I don't think you can have both. I think you can't be wearing 2 hats essentially. So I wasn't sure if that was what kind of came up from that question. I was a little uncertain, but I just wanted to clarify that. So you know, if you wanted, say that again?
Could we have like a current employee be Charles Kilmer, for example, if he's elected by the employees to be the trustee? Sorry, Charlie, I don't know that you want to be that, but let's just say he was. Could he be that person, and could Mary Waldron be 3.2A, the person with investment experience?
Yeah, so that's absolutely, so as far as the elected employee, whoever that turns out to be, it is what it is. It's then for the then the person with the investment experience is as broad as it can possibly be. I said the council really will be the one who sets what, you know, what it is you're looking for. I suppose if need be, we could put in, if you want to do, you know, 3.2A, you could even do like a subsection to that and say, this person is defined, you know, the minimum requirements are X. If you wanted to add something like that in, but beyond that, yeah, man, I don't see any reason if Mary fits the criteria, she could do that as well.
Well, then that, I mean, the way it is, I think satisfies my concern. I appreciate your responding on that one. Thanks.
And so Matt, I don't think that it's necessary to have a sub underneath that. I think that the ability for the council at this point to, the investment experience is the investment experience, right?
Sure.
Any other on this particular page?
Mary, I had a question for Matt on 3.4. Is this language required? Because I looked at the language and the 840 CMR talks a lot about PERIC, and it was pretty specific with the person that was representing the current employees. This had to be done by election. There had to be like a nomination form with 20 signatures on it. And I just wonder, is this more of just a guideline, and can we just stick with like the MGL, or could we get rid of it?
So the difficulty with 3.4 is that one, there's not a ton of these OPEB trusts that have elections, frankly. So I haven't really seen the layout that would, you know, the possibilities. The only ones I've been familiar with are what is used in the retirement board situation, and that's why I put that in there. So I put the language in there that to the extent practical, because I want to have some guidance in there. Now, if you wanted, I could lay out what the actual procedures needed to be, but I don't know. I guess there's no perfect answer here. I mean, if you wanted to decide on the steps, you know, I think you need to have someone be nominated. I mean, if you're going to have an election, you have to have nominations.
Right.
And then, so that the PERAC, so the 840 CMR is the PERAC regulations. They're codified, that deals with the 104 retirement systems. So I thought that they were as analogous as a situation as I could find for this particular, this particular situation. But it's absolutely something that I can, like, we can wiggle, play with that. But like the statute itself, the OPEB statute, section 20, is silent on the mechanisms of the election.
Right.
So it just says by ballot. And
Okay.
so I think it would be helpful to have something in this trust that lays out, the steps that you have to take. So that's why I put that in there. But if you wanted to be, we could take that out and then say 3.4, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and say that this is what needs to happen as well. Whatever guidance you give me, I will do.
And because it affects only 3.2 C and D, right? It's the election of the retiree, and it's the election of the current employee. You have
I mean, the
22
one thing is
employees.
you want to have consistency in what you want to have it be the same rules each time.
Mhm.
The thing that's hard is like, there's not going to, I don't expect this is going to be a highly coveted position, most likely from my experience. But I don't know, there could be, two people that really want this, and there's, they put, house signs up on the lawn and everything, and, they want this position badly. I'm guessing it's not going to go that direction, but, no matter what you do, if you wanted to take 3.4 out, I would recommend that there be some substitution with kind of the rules that you want to follow for an election, just so it's in there, so there's no confusion. Because what I have in there, as I said, I put it to the extent practical because it doesn't all apply, but it does lay
Right.
out some, it talks about the election official and there's nominations and, I mean, you can, there might be something we need to really like narrow in on possibly. But I think that's for the committee or subsequently the council to decide if how you want that to be. I'm more than happy to, what I could do is I could go through those CMRs and pull out what I think would be the most, helpful guidelines, I guess. But no matter what, you're going to have some sort of nomination process, a
Yep.
time period in which the nomination process occurs. One thing I liked about that, I'm pretty sure the CMRs also list the fact that if there's just one nominee, that person wins. There's no election
did.
needed.
It did say that, which was nice.
So it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. The only way to really capture exactly what it is that you want would be for us to have probably a relatively lengthy conversation about the exact steps that would want to be taken by either this committee or subsequently the council for this election for these two positions.
Matt, we could always leave it as is. And if the board finds that it's too cumbersome, then we can look to change it then. I think it is going to be a little bit challenging, but let's not spend a lot of time on it now till we see it in action.
Yep. Okay, so we now get onto administration of the trust funds. And Matt deleted this.
So this is just, I put, this is an addition. I had just a note in my margin that someone had said that no documents should be leaving.
Right.
So I just added that in there.
Got it.
Take it or leave it. It doesn't, it's fine.
Matt? We still talk about in 3.6, once a trustee has resigned, that
Yep.
they need to promptly return the documents.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to delete that because they shouldn't have any documents.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that and my thought, I was trying to be kind of like encompass everything possible.
Okay.
Because what if a trustee did have a document, then this says it maybe, I mean, I've said this before on multiple occasions, I feel like there could be some belt and suspenders action here. If
Okay.
you want to take that, I don't think it's a problem to have both of them in there.
Okay. I just don't want to give mixed messages, but that's fine.
Could I clarify then? Because I read those as not being in conflict because I thought 3.6 applied to like copies and things. Whereas 4.2, I thought referred to original trust documents, because I would imagine that if we have a bunch of trustees, the same way with our board meetings or our council meetings, people are going to send out financial reports and things that are related to the operation of the trust, the email for people to review in advance of the meeting. So I read 4.2 as meaning the actual records of the trust, whereas in 3.6, I thought even copies should be returned to the trust, theoretically. Matt, is that not the way you intended it?
No, I mean, it can be, what might be, if everyone's, I mean, to Becky's point, what we could do is we could add that specific language in there about, for 3.6, we could say, well, actually, I mean, I don't even know if we'd have to do anything for 3.6, but for 4.2, add in language to the extent of no original trust documents or original trust related documents shall be moved from this address, something like that. If that would
I
satisfy.
think I would put original in
Huh?
4.2, and then I think we'd be clean.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. So then we move on to powers and duties. And sufficient funds to pay for such reasonable necessary expenses.
Mhm.
Any investment manager subject to procurement process under Mass General laws.
So that was one thing we wanted to clarify. I think you would have to go through the RFP process under the procurement statute.
Mhm.
That was one of the questions, yes.
So that's what I added that in.
As concerns, please see the additional change to section 7.
So there were a couple things from section 5 that came up from both my notes and the email that was sent. One was 5.1G, one was 5.1I. So 5.1G, I think we should maybe hold off on discussing at this point, because I think we should kind of, let's see what people's thoughts are about section 7 in terms of kind of the guardrails that I tried putting in there. And then, but 5.1I is a specific question that was raised. And so this was my colleague who is familiar with these particular matters. We discussed this, and this is what his recommendation was, and I agree with it. So 5.1I.
Yep. Any questions from council members?
And that could be a higher number too. But you know, that was the question as far as like kind of a baseline.
Mhm. I'll keep moving on.
And there was a question that came up. I think it is in number 8. And, you know, I talked it over with my colleague, and this is absolutely something that, like, I think you definitely want to have in here. You know, delegation, you're going to have employees, you're going to, you know, have, agents and something, I don't know, maybe independent contractors, depending how things play out. You're going to want to be able to delegate authority on certain things. So you don't want to have call a board meeting every time something minor needs to occur. So I think this is something that would be very, very much advisable to have that be a power provided to the trustees.
Thanks, Matt. In here was with board approval, checks designation. We talked about that last time.
Yep.
The identification of trustees or employee.
So that was not something that was specifically came up either in my notes or
Right.
our letters, actually are the notes that were provided. But I did go through, and it's referenced in the statute, and so I just thought it might be a cleaner thing to have. And I think we want to be, you know, more protections are better, frankly. You know, I think people would, because if people were going to become engaged with the trust, they want to make sure they know that if they didn't do anything wrong, that they're not going to be on the bad end of a lawsuit or something like that.
Right. Any questions on that? This goes back, this whole section here seems to be employee. Okay.
And there was another thing in this section. I think Becky, we touched upon it at the last meeting regarding 6.2 and 6.5. So, you know, what it comes down to is, I think, Becky, I think the notes, let me just look at my own notes on that. There was questions about, you know, intentional, willful, and you wanted to be able to, you know, what about if it's something like an innocent breach or something like that? So as I said, I took the language directly out of the statute, and to the extent there's any, this helps at all. Well, I think we need to leave it as is, will be my advice. But, you know, from a legal perspective, breach of fiduciary duty has a legal definition. Willful has a legal definition. Intentional has a legal definition. So these aren't words that lack meaning. If something were to happen, you'd be applying those legal definitions to the actions as to whether it was a breach, whether it was willful, or whether it was intentional. So I think because it's the specific language taken from the statute, I think it should be in there. But I don't think you need to be concerned necessarily about the kind of innocent type things, because it's not going to kind of be a problem for those 3 scenarios that are provided within the statute.
Your feeling is that the breach of fiduciary duty is a high enough standard legally, and it is what the statute seems to require for trustees, that you would recommend that we leave it as is, rather than try to have a lower standard in terms of protection for the trustees.
Yeah, I think your point is well taken. I would not feel comfortable going at saying anything below what the statute requires. So the thing with section 20 of the OPEB statute is that there is some things that require some creativity, I guess. One thing, for instance, is the elections, which we're just talking about. There's no real guidance on those. It says by ballot. However, if there is a particular area that is discussed in, in this particular situation, specifically enumerated definitions or, or types of problems that could develop that are put in the statute, I wouldn't feel comfortable going below that threshold.
Fair enough. I hadn't gone back and looked at the statute on that, so that's fair point.
Matt, could you add an employee to 3, or is there a reason why it just says board or individual trustee and not employee in this one instance?
I'm sorry, which number are you on?
6.5, 3, the intentional violation. Should that say or employee as well, board?
Hold on one sec. So the exact language ends with an intentional violation of law by the trustee or employee. So what did you want me to
Oh,
add?
I'm sorry. I didn't think it said employee. I thought it just said board or an individual
Oh, wait,
trustee.
you know what? No,
It
I'm
does.
sorry. No, I'm sorry. I think that's my screw up. I'm looking, I did not add that in. You are correct.
Okay.
By the trustee or employee. Yes, absolutely. 6.5, we can add in. Individual trustee or employee. Yep, can make that change.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt.
Sorry, I missed that.
Nope, no worries.
Think that's it for, the only thing is I just added in 6.9, I think that I had a note that you wanted the address specifically stated in there again.
Mhm.
So I just added that in.
Yep.
So now we get to section 7 or Article 7, what do you want to look at it, which discusses some of the concerns that I think numerous parties had about, this is kind of the guardrails, the checks and balances, whatever cliches you want to throw at the situation. So this was my attempt at trying to, I guess, assuage some of those concerns. So I'm more than happy to hear people's thoughts on it. So I added in 5 sections to this particular article, and I think I hope that it responds to the concerns raised by the council at the last meeting. But as I said, more than happy to hear what people's thoughts are.
Can we just walk through them since we have them up here on the shared screen? So
Yeah.
the 7.3, Matt?
Yeah, so the first one just talks about, and this is one problem here is I don't know how this would actually work. Like, if that's one problem we have, is like, this is a document of the trust, but no other organization is bound by this. So I'm suggesting that, you have to have a second person be part of opening up a checking account. So, I don't know. I don't have any personal experience with this, but that's just one thing I'm recommending. It might not be a possibility, but I don't see why there's a problem putting it in there. So that would be the first thing I would suggest. Then adding in, this was reflected in, I think, item number 9 from the last meeting is 7.4, talking about the multiple signatures. So having an additional signatory on the account that is required to do pretty much any action on the account. So I added that in. And then in terms of who that signatory would be, it would be by majority vote of the board, but shall is a mandatory term, an active trustee. And once that signatory is no longer a member of the board, that person's no longer part of the, actually, I could also add in, I could possibly add in language. Oh, I have two 7.6s there. I need to change that. I could add in language saying that, that you have to pick a new additional signatory within 30 days of a trustee leaving or something like that as well. Just so it doesn't go on, because that happens sometimes. Someone leaves and no one really thinks about it. So I'm more than happy to listen to any thoughts people have on that. And then the last thing I just added in was just one last guardrail to just kind of almost an auditing, giving the council more auditing power in a way that they could request, they want to find out something, they can just send. I mean, I think the council probably has that same power. I think we put it in there with the trustees themselves, but I think there was concern about the custodian standing alone having this power. So I added that in at 7 point. I think it actually says 7.6 twice, but that'll be 7.7. I just changed it on my file.
And I just changed it here on the.
All right, good.
Any comments about those additions?
They look good to me, Matt.
Yeah. And then amendments, termination or of trust fund?
So I just added in majority vote of the board and written and posted notice to the council. That was, I think, something that Christine had brought up. Now, I didn't specifically reference the open meeting law in that section, but I added it in into 8.4, a specific note, which is, I mean, I will say it's not necessary, but it's never bad to have that little reminder in there to make it clear that, obviously the trust has to apply. You can't put anything in a trust that's going to be in opposition to the statute. So it's in there. So, maybe not necessary, but it's fine being there if everyone's happy with that.
Yep.
Thank you, Matt.
And then the last change I made was in Article 11. I took out, that's about the quorum language that you wanted me to take out about having one of the elected members having to be present for the quorum.
Right. Yep.
All right, so that was the last change. Now there's one thing that there's one question that came up. I just may pull up my email real quick. I want to just there was a question that, let me see, came up from, I'm not sure if it was Christine or Becky. Let me look at my notes here. Christine in number 5 asked at the end, what are the responsibilities for covering expenses if the trust lacks funds? So I don't think there's anything we need to put in there in the trust per se. Obviously the expense, the main expense that exists is paying of, retiree benefits. And that's an obligation of the government, of the OCPC, not the trust per se. The trust is a vehicle by which you fund it and get investment value. However, as far as if there were, for instance, if you had hired somebody, I don't know, you had hired an actuary, for instance, and you did that and there were no funds, then the council's not going to be on the hook for that, because the trustees, if they did it in good faith, aren't going to be on the hook for it. There shouldn't be, because that's where the indemnification language comes in. So it's a very unlikely situation that you're going to be kind of, I guess, writing checks that you can't cover. But there shouldn't be any exposure because of the indemnification language that's in there. Once again, unless there is a problem, if there is a fiduciary breach, if there is willful misconduct or intentional, whatever the three lines were. Let me just go back and quote them. Breach of fiduciary duty, act of willful dishonesty, or an intentional violation of law by the board or individual trustee. So, I looked into the question. I don't think there's any necessity to adding anything in at that point.
Thank you, Matt.
So those are all the changes that I proposed based off of our prior conversations.
Does anybody have, I could still leave this up, or do you need me? Oh, Becky does.
My other question is, who was it at our last meeting who was concerned about the council giving up authority over OPEB?
That was
That's Frank.
And we got that answered.
Okay, so are we good on that? There's nothing else that needs to go in here? Okay,
I talked to him today. He was not able to attend, but Sean Noel and I both spent time with Frank after the last meeting and talked about this process and what it means. Frank also then went to his own town council and got assurances as well. So he I do not have anything in writing that says that, but I can tell you that both Sean Noel and I said he's all set with that, with that process and comfortable.
Okay.
So I think, Matt, I think all the questions, and again, appreciated the council members' thoughtfulness in reviewing, as well as having Sean Noel take that meeting, because there was a lot of questions and information, but putting it in a very succinct way. And then because Matt, obviously with all the things you had going on in your life, it was easier to have us kind of tee that up for you. And it was also helpful for me to kind of read through the questions in terms of, you know, all of what was addressed. And I believe that you addressed all of that for the council members. If I'm correct.
Yeah, I very, very much appreciate that consideration. That was very, very helpful to me to be able to get this turned around to you. And so I very much appreciate that. Ordinarily, it would not have been something I would have requested.
And I will not take credit for that. That was all Sean Noel, and maybe a little twisting of an arm, but it was an easy twist of arm for him to do it. It really was. And so, and since he has that done, he now has all the minutes done for the next meeting. So we're doing good. But I think if there are no questions, I think, Matt, from our perspective, I think the council members may want to have some discussions without without you. And then, but knowing that if there are any, you'll be certain to be getting an email or a phone call from us if there are further delineations. And then obviously we know the assistance that Murphy Hesse Toomey Lane can offer to OCPC in terms of next steps. But I think that's where the council members, if I'm correct, Mr. Chair and Madam President and other members, where we would go from this point on. Great. Matt, tell me the name of your son again.
His name's John Lawrence Feeney. We're calling him Jack.
Thanks,
Oh,
and Jack, well,
love
best
it.
wishes, and can't, you know, I'm hoping that Jack gets home sooner than you want him to. So
Yeah.
best wishes.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you, Matt.
Mary,
Thank you,
for speaking
Matt.
out. Thanks, guys.
I'll be
Talk to you
in
later.
touch. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Chair?
So I guess, I mean, obviously he's going to make the edits that we went over today. Once those edits are done, I'm assuming you'd want us to put that to a vote of accepting the declaration of trust and sending it to a council vote to adopt it.
Correct. Don't forget, you also have your finance meeting that's coming up on the 24th. That's why we really wanted to separate that conversation today on this matter. So that is the next step. It will be a cleaned copy. As you saw, I was making most of them. I didn't accept them along the way, but now that we've gone through that, I can go through and do that and then send that off to Matt for one final review. And then that will be ready for finance meeting recommendation, or you can make that recommendation to the council based upon the conversation. You can stay one step, I guess. So.
Okay, yeah, so once I see that final and it's sent to all the members of the finance committee, we'll just do a roll call vote on it next meeting, which I think is what, next week?
It is next Tuesday,
Yeah.
5:45. We're getting closer to Megan coming back, so we'll all be happier with having things be a little bit more smoother. But and I think if just for staff members, I believe there will be,